Hey, what's up everyone? Mirai here again with some more footage from Final Fantasy XIV that I was able to grab over the last few days. This video is going to be more of an overview of what I've seen and experienced in this short time while doing instances, and I'm just going to play some random footage of me multiboxing in the background while I cover some topics. This is not a guide or a tutorial of any sort, and I'm not going to go over any of boss mechanics or class mechanics, nothing like that. This is more or less just a video showing that multiboxing in Final Fantasy XIV is viable and maybe some things to watch out for. So I finally got a chance to start my mixed team of cat girls, and I was able to tackle some instances that you're seeing me do here in the background. I was curious to see how difficult they would be, because if the lower level instances were extremely tough, then I would assume that the higher level instances were probably just as tough, if not tougher. But they were pretty easy once I got the hang of things. Now, for some of you who've watched some of my other videos, you might know that I'm a fan of mixed teams when trying to overcome PvE content. You know, filling the tank, DPS, and healer roles with the correct classes. So I went with a Gladiator tank, 2 Thaumaturges for DPS and CC, and a Conjurer for some legit heals. And it all seemed to work out well. Word on the street is that the Arcanist and Summoner pets can completely replace a tank in an instance, but I'm not really a fan of gimmicky groups like that, because if Square Enix ever decided to nerf those pets so that they were no longer viable tanks, well, now you're stuck. Now you're stuck without an actual tank. So at least with a designated tank, healer, and DPS, you'll always be set no matter what happens. But with that being said, there have been numerous multiboxers who are playing that have been able to complete instances. So that's a good sign. I will say that I'm still not comfortable with how the game itself plays. Maybe I'm just not used to it, but I think the biggest thing that was throwing me off was the fact that the global cooldown in this game is 2.5 seconds long. To put that into perspective, most games have about a 1.5 second global cooldown on abilities. So in Final Fantasy XIV, if you miss a cast, if you screw up somewhere along the way, 2.5 seconds can be an eternity when it's coming down to the wire, because you're also most likely tacking on another 2 to 3 seconds of cast time from the ability itself. So it might be a total of 4 to 5 seconds until you can fix a mistake that you just made. And you can very easily end up dead in that amount of time. Now, this game might be pretty unforgiving if you're a new multiboxer without any experience under your belt, and I say this for 2 reasons. First, the gameplay itself can feel a little clunky. I don't know if there's a better way for me to put that, but if you've played Final Fantasy XIV as well as any other mainstream MMO, then you might understand where I'm coming from with this. And before anyone says it, no, it's not latency. What it seems to be is a side effect of the game trying to be more realistic with its character animations, but those animations seem to affect what you're allowed to cast and when you're allowed to cast it. Now, as an example, you can see here on my Gladiator that I've got 3 different abilities bound to 4, Q, and E, right there in the middle of my action bars. You can also clearly see that they're off the global cooldown because they don't have that spiral animation, which is on some of my other abilities there. You'll have to just take my word for it that they're all instant cast, but if I was to hit 4 and then immediately hit E to try to use 2 of my bigger cooldowns at the same time, E wouldn't fire off. In fact, neither one of them may fire off depending on what my character was previously doing. Because another example would be, say, if I was to hit 1 for a normal attack, and which is on the global, and then immediately press 4 followed by E. It's likely that neither 4 nor E will actually fire off in that situation, and that's because my tank hasn't finished her sword swing attack animation, so she can't do anything else. Now, I'm not claiming that this is the way that every spell in the game works, because I obviously haven't played every class to level 50, but this was something that I really had to get accustomed to. I really had to get used to it in those oh shit situations. I mean, I would be trying to use 4, which is a shield block that helps me mitigate incoming damage, and at the same time use E, which is an ability that lets me receive more healing from potions and spells. But they would never, ever fire off back to back, and it just felt awkward in that sense for me to have to wait between these so-called instant casts that are off the global. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that you'll need to adjust and become accustomed to, because in many other games that I've played, spells that are off the global and have no cast time, well, they fire off back to back right as I press the keys. Now, the second reason I say that this game may be unforgiving to newcomers is that fights can be quite long, and you'll need to be on top of your tanking, healing, and DPSing at almost all times, more so than other games I've multiboxed. I had some trash pulls that lasted as long as, say, like a boss fight from World of Warcraft, and boss fights in this game can be upwards of 5 to 7 minutes depending on how good or how bad your DPS is. I can't imagine that this changes much more in the later levels of the game. So just be ready to focus on your class's roles for an extended period of time and prepare your fingers and your wrists for some possible cramping from repeatedly mashing on the keys. On the other hand, maybe I was doing something completely wrong. Maybe I should have tried to get my Conjurer to help add to the DPS, but I felt that I was healing so often, I didn't really want to let my tank die because I was busy DPSing with my healer. I mean, that's just poor multiboxing right there. Now, just to touch on my setup that you're seeing here, in case someone's interested about it, the images that you're seeing to the left of my party frames are menu buttons that I created in ISBoxer. They're just buttons that overlay the game, which I can click on to do certain things. And in this case, they're all tied to my Conjurer for healing and buffs and whatnot. The buttons themselves execute a basic two-step mapped key, which first makes the Conjurer target that specific character, and then presses the key assigned to her healing spell. Nothing fancy or groundbreaking, but it does take 2 clicks to work. You never actually see me use those buttons though, because I had my main tank heal hard-coded to one of the buttons on my mouse. Not really the best way to do things, but I was short on time thanks to my world being heavily populated and me getting nailed with the infamous 1017 error repeatedly throughout the last few days. Well, that pretty much covers everything at the moment. Multiboxing looks very viable, and there are a handful of people on both the ISBoxer and the Dual Dash Boxing forums who are looking to multibox the game right from the get-go. Just like the last video, I'll leave you guys with a nice long fight. This is the final boss of the second instance, Thaumaturge Deepcroft. Enjoy.